Hey guys, thanks for coming back to Psycho Talk. What if I told you that right now, someone you love could be slowly dismantling your mind, piece by piece, and you wouldn't even know it's happening? What if the person you trust most in this world is deliberately making you question your own sanity? Let that sink in for a second. Have you ever been completely certain something happened, only to have someone convince you it didn't? Have you ever felt like you were going crazy in a relationship that everyone else said looked perfect? Because here's the terrifying truth about gaslighting. It doesn't start with screaming. It doesn't start with violence. It starts with a whisper, a gentle correction, a concerned look. And by the time you realize what's happening, you don't trust your own mind anymore. The term gaslighting comes from a 1944 film called Gaslight. In it, a husband slowly manipulates his wife into believing she's losing her mind. He dims the gaslights in their home, then denies it's happening when she notices. He hides objects, then accuses her of stealing them. And here's what's chilling about that story. It was based on real manipulation tactics that psychologists were already documenting. But let's talk about how this plays out in the real world. Consider the case of a woman we'll call Sarah, a name changed to protect her identity, but her story was documented in the Journal of Psychological Trauma in 2019. Sarah was a successful marketing executive, sharp, confident, the kind of woman who commanded rooms. She met David at a conference. He was charming, attentive. He remembered every detail she ever told him. Within months, the subtle shifts began. Sarah would mention a conversation they'd had, and David would look at her with genuine concern. "Honey, that never happened. Are you feeling okay?" She'd find her keys in strange places. David would sigh sadly and say she'd been so forgetful lately. He suggested she see a doctor. Maybe something was wrong with her. Within 2 years, Sarah had quit her job because David convinced her she couldn't handle the stress. She had isolated from friends because David told her they'd been saying cruel things about her, things she couldn't remember but he insisted happened. She was taking medication for a mental illness she never had. Think about that for a second. The psychology behind this first mechanism is something researchers call reality manipulation. Dr. Robin Stern from Yale identified this as the foundation of all gaslighting. The abuser doesn't just lie. They create an alternate reality. And here's why it works so devastatingly well. Your brain has something called the memory conformity effect. When someone you trust contradicts your memory, your hippocampus actually begins to rewrite what you remember. Your brain literally changes your memories to match what you're being told. You're not just being lied to. Your own mind is being turned against you. And it gets darker. The second mechanism is what psychologists call isolation engineering. And the case that haunts researchers to this day is the story of a man named Chris Watts. In 2018, Chris murdered his pregnant wife Shanann and their 2 daughters. But what emerged in the investigation revealed years of sophisticated gaslighting. Shanann's friends reported that Chris had slowly convinced her that her family was toxic, that her friends didn't really care about her, that only he truly understood her. He'd tell her she was being paranoid when she sensed his affair. He'd look into her eyes with complete sincerity and say she was imagining things. In text messages recovered after the murders, Shanann wrote to a friend, "Sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy. Chris says everything is fine, but something feels so wrong." Her instincts were screaming at her, but the gaslighting had done its work. She didn't trust herself anymore.
The neuroscience here is terrifying. When you're repeatedly told your perceptions are wrong, your anterior cingulate cortex, the part of your brain responsible for error detection, becomes hyperactive. You start second-guessing everything. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, responsible for confident decision-making, shows decreased activity. Brain scans of gaslighting victims look remarkably similar to brain scans of people with chronic anxiety disorders. And here's the counterintuitive fact that shocks most people. The more intelligent you are, the more susceptible you might be to gaslighting. Why? Because smart people are often more willing to consider that they might be wrong. They're more open to alternative explanations. Gaslighters exploit intellectual humility. But we haven't reached the darkest part yet. The third mechanism is called identity erosion. And for this, I need to tell you about a documented case from the psychiatric literature involving a woman named Eleanor. Eleanor was a physician. She'd spent 12 years in medical practice. She knew the human mind. And yet, her husband managed to convince her over 6 years that she was fundamentally incompetent. It started with small things. He'd question her diagnoses at dinner. Just curious questions, he said. Then he started suggesting maybe medicine wasn't really her calling. Maybe she'd made a mistake. Maybe she wasn't as smart as she thought. The documented interviews with Eleanor after she finally escaped
are devastating to read. She said, "I would stand in front of patients and suddenly forget basic procedures I'd done 1,000 times. I started believing I was dangerous. I was going to hurt someone. He'd told me so many times that I was barely holding it together, that I started to become that person." She wasn't forgetting because something was wrong with her brain. She was forgetting because chronic psychological abuse had triggered such severe anxiety that her working memory was being actively suppressed. Her husband had literally altered her cognitive function through words alone. Let that sink in. But here's the hidden truth that most people never discover about gaslighting. The part that reframes everything I've just told you. Gaslighters usually don't know they're gaslighting. Studies from the University of Michigan found that the majority of people who engage in gaslighting behavior genuinely believe their version of events. They're not consciously thinking, "I'm going to manipulate this person." They've often constructed their own false reality first, and they're inviting you into it. This is why confronting a gaslighter almost never works. When you accuse them of lying, they're not acting when they look hurt and confused. In their mind, you're the one distorting reality. You're the one being unfair. This is connected to a pattern psychologists call self-deceptive enhancement. The gaslighter has unconsciously protected their ego by rewriting their own memories first. Which means you're not just fighting against someone who's lying to you, you're fighting against someone who has made themselves believe their lies. And that is almost impossible to win against. Let's go deeper into what's happening in the brain, both yours and theirs. Dr. George Simon, a leading researcher in manipulation psychology, found that gaslighting triggers your brain's attachment system. When someone you love tells you you're wrong, your brain releases cortisol, the stress hormone. But it also releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, because you're seeking reassurance from your attachment figure. You're being stressed and bonded simultaneously. This creates a trauma bond that's neurologically similar to addiction. The gaslighter's brain shows something different. Research using fMRI scans shows decreased activity in the insula, the region responsible for empathy and emotional recognition. They literally process your distress differently. Some researchers believe this is a protective mechanism their own brain developed, possibly from being gaslighted themselves as children. Gaslighting often breeds gaslighting. The cycle passes through generations. That person slowly dismantling your reality may have had their own reality dismantled first. It doesn't excuse them, but it explains the horror of how this pattern perpetuates. Now I need to speak directly to you, because statistically, someone watching this video right now is being gaslighted, and you might not know it. Here are 3 warning signs that should make you pay very close attention. First, you find yourself constantly apologizing, even when you're not sure what you did wrong. You've become a person who says sorry as a reflex. That's not politeness, that's conditioning. Second, you feel confused after conversations with a specific person. Not during other parts of your life, not with other people, but with them. You walk away questioning things you were certain of 5 minutes before. Trust that confusion. It's a signal. Third, and this is the most important, you've stopped telling friends and family what's really going on in your relationship. Not because things are private, but because you know how it would sound. Because even you think, maybe you're being too sensitive. Maybe you're the problem. If you recognized yourself in any of those signs, I need you to understand something. Your perception is not broken. Your memory is not failing. Your instincts that something is wrong, those instincts are trying to save you. The most devastating thing about gaslighting isn't the lies. It's that it makes you abandon yourself. It makes you betray your own mind. And the first step to escaping is deciding to trust yourself again, even when it feels impossible. Document everything. Write things down immediately after they happen. Tell someone outside the relationship what's going on. And if that voice in your head is screaming that something isn't right, listen to it. Because that voice is the last part of you that hasn't been rewritten yet. Thanks for staying till the end. Please like and subscribe.